next speaker this morning is Francisco Songane, who is former Minister of Health of Mozambique. Welcome and good morning. He's going to speak about country leadership and coherence among global actors as being key elements to ensuring care for all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you and good morning. Distinguished guests, colleagues and friends. Thank you, Medicus Mundi Switzerland, for the invitation. And congratulations for organizing this event for a discussion that challenges the status quo. Delighted to participate. Health for all by 2030 is quite right as the central theme for this symposium. Now that we have already started the journey towards 2030 with the quest of addressing the inequities, the imbalances, and all elements contributing to the lack of social justice. We are living in a divided world where what is set forth in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is enjoyed by some, with many others, particularly in the least developed countries, still struggling to survive and not knowing what their children will eat the following day. As per World Bank estimates, in 2015, about 1 billion people were living on less than $1.90 a day. It is the Health for All motto that will remind us about what is required to ensure that everyone, everywhere, will enjoy the highest attainable standard of health, as stated in the Constitution of the World Health Organization, in line with Article 25 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This is a critical premise of always keeping the human rights lens in all the deliberations for policy decision-making and program implementation. Health for All was the drive emerging from Alma-Ata, and it was a noble occasion where a consensus was reached to put in practice the principles of the Constitution of the World Health Organization, as it was well articulated in the declaration adopted at the end of the conference. It was a landmark, and indeed, the declaration mobilized every actor dealing with health in being reminded about the right to health and seeing the part of primary health care. It was revolutionary. People put at the center and the humanity redeemed, a moment to recognize and strengthen the health systems to enable the fulfillment of the aspiration of all peoples. The enthusiasm generated from Alma-Ata was contagious and spontaneously turned into a movement disseminating the vision across the world. The Alma-Ata Declaration had its limitations, particularly for not devising a mechanism for accountability and the oversimplification of the message carried through primary health care. A great momentum had been created. Every actor was embracing the call, but there was nothing to keep the systems in check. And soon, this loophole was exploited by some, taking advantage of the tilted scale of the world power, which favored the structural adjustment policies with their well-known harmful consequences. The notion of selective primary health care was introduced as a quick and easy sale, encompassing only some interventions, not requiring large sums of money, and yielding quick results. On the other hand, the oversimplification of primary health care did pose question marks from the countries most in need, particularly their professional bodies, as there was suspicion that a framework was being set to provide, quote, second-class health care for people. These two factors combined played into the hands of the large economic powers and the international financial and development institutions pushing the structural adjustment agenda. Many countries made efforts in putting the Alma Ata recommendations in practice and were making strides in the improvement of their health systems. But lack of financial and technical support to invest in infrastructure and the corresponding human resources development led to stagnation and, in some instances, reversal of the gains already achieved. Nonetheless, the content of the Alma Ata Declaration continued to be the resources to refer to whenever the world found itself at a crossroads. It is its rights approach and the call for solidarity which reminds us of the unacceptable situation expressed through inequities and compels us to act. It happened in 2000 with the Millennium Declaration, as shocking evidence was accumulating of the protracted appalling conditions 36% of the world people lived in, when the global economic throughput was of $33.5 trillion. In 2008, marking the 30th anniversary of Alma Ata, the World Health Organization dedicated that year World Health Report to renew the call for health care for all, highlighting its pertinence and pointing out that it was then more needed than before. The incomplete message of primary health care was well dealt with, laying out the different elements and functions as integral part of the health system. Another important take-home message from that publication is the crucial role of leadership to move the agenda forward. In the same year, another seminal work was published, the Report on the Social Determinants of Health, pointing squarely on the right to health and well-being as a departing premise in trying to address the inequities. Further, it clearly explained, showing evidence that many of the manifestations of poor health have their origins outside the health sector. There could be no more doubt about the multi-sectoral approach articulated in the Alma Ata Declaration. In its turn, Global Health Watch 2 discussed the politics of global health and the actions of some of the main actors, calling for better governance of global health and minimize the harmful consequences, particularly for the least resourced countries. 2 weeks ago in Astana, delegates reaffirmed the role of primary health care in achieving universal health coverage, and in recognizing the unsatisfactory achievement of primary health care, committed to establish a systemic review of the implementation of the Astana Declaration. All the elements to clarify issues and provide additional information to allow a much better understanding of the full meaning of the primary health care approach are available and emanated from authoritative publications, so it seems to be time to take a different stand. We cannot keep on learning only, as it is usual comment when a report comes out exposing the reasons for lack of progress. We need to act. Right to health calls for responsibility from all sides and requires solidarity in actions to ensure the well-being of everyone, everywhere. It is a huge undertaking, and on the long run, not amenable to quick fixes and partial and temporary satisfaction for some results that can be shown in a very short period of time. And above all, not an exercise to be done in fashion waves, as per initiatives or some standalone appealing programs. Well-functioning health systems in the context of the overall country development are key to success, and these can only be achieved through a comprehensive investment combined with the good synchronization of all parties. The countries should be at the center, and all the activities concerned guided by the country strategies and programs. This is what is enshrined in the Sustainable Development Agenda, to which the whole world signed up to and committed to respect. Respect, solidarity, and the will is what is required to avoid failure as it has happened before. We need to make clear we do not lack frameworks and platforms to guide our joint work. We had the Paris Declaration on Aid Effectiveness, the Accra Agenda for Action, the IHP, which is International Health Partnership, the IHP Plus, and eventually the Busan Partnership for Effective Development Cooperation. The facts on the ground and the global modus operandi have shown that the happiness and the togetherness marking all these events is short-living, as the countries find themselves in the same situation of having their programs sidelined or pushed to change the way that they are implementing due to conditions tied to funding opportunities or due to external factors associated to geopolitical issues. There have been several global initiatives to address health problems of international concern, each one with its way of channeling funds, conditions, and specific reporting requirements, but stop short of funding the country program and have a comprehensive approach towards strengthening health systems. On the contrary, the systems are further weakened, and the technical staff in the ministries concerned absorbed in keeping the multiple deadlines to secure the continuity of funding. This is contrary to the agreements and frameworks mentioned above and outside the spirit of the commitment to the Sustainable Development Agenda. There has to be coherence among the global players between what is agreed and the practice of their agents and the way they interact with the countries. It is the right to health that is at stake, and this selective approach cannot be effective in building strong health systems and functioning systems, the backbone of any country to face up to the complexities of delivering health care for its people. The world is undergoing many changes, some of them unexpected, and possibly outside of what could fit to normality, and the multilateral international institutions being gradually relegated to second plan. These institutions were created with the purpose of establishing platforms for resolution of important universal problems and reach consensus and common understanding on how we should regulate ourselves as countries within our diversity. They provided the support and the platform to the process that led to the Agenda 2030. And we have no other way for the countries and indeed the people from the different corners of the world to express their concerns and points of view as we continue to nurture this movement to advance humanity. Health for all is about the people and their rights, and the action takes place in the countries where they live. Therefore, leadership and abiding by the rules of good governance are critical elements to move the agenda forward with the people at the center as direct agents for change and not mere recipients of services. Good governance is the backbone for the moral stand that is required to effectively exert leadership in coordinating the different partners and stay the course, guided by the country program. This characteristic has been essential in the success registered by the countries which stood up as examples in implementation of the primary health care. Indeed, leadership and a clear sense of direction by national authorities, complemented by consistency in the strategy and development plans, are common features in countries doing well today in advancing health for their people integrated in their development plans. We are all conscious of the magnitude of this undertaking that countries can't address alone. And it is in this context that as we mark the 40 years of Alma Ata, we should remind ourselves of the importance of solidarity in all actions by the development partners. It is not we and them. It's not about someone or some outside institution determining the standard of care or the kind of services for a particular country, but about what is needed for the country to ensure that all citizens enjoy the highest attainable standard of health. Lack of proper accountability has been one of the main reasons for the repeated disruptions which undermine consistency in program implementation at the country level. There is clear imbalance for power, favoring considerably the countries and institutions providing support, even alleging criteria not related to the terms of the signed agreements, like geopolitical circumstances or dislike of a particular social route chosen by the country. This area has gone unchecked as far as human rights are concerned, and it is often a key driver of the deepening of the quality gaps and reversals where progress was the order of the day. There is no coherence between what the different players sign up for and what happens in practice. And the usual excuse is to start another discussion for a new agreement or framework. Proper messaging about the right to health care seems to be where to start, so that people are informed to allay reservations in questioning the disparities and eventually lead to a concerted action demanding change of attitude. This is one of the fronts to be pursued in close collaboration with the country's institutions, translating the human rights language into facts which are part of the day-to-day living. One concrete example is the use of disaggregated data rather than global, be national, provincial, or even district. Internationally, there is already a special rapporteur on the rights to health under the auspices of the UN High Commission for Human Rights. This is an important platform, and it seems pertinent to suggest expanding the remit of the special rapporteur to include the assessment of the regional, sub-regional, and international actors, as well as signatories of the key agreements and frameworks on aid effectiveness. Certainly, it will require more staff and a good support base, but it is worth doing if we are determined to at least see the principles of Alma Ata put in practice and the right to health fulfilled, backed by effective and responsive health systems. Again, monitoring is essential, and the different organizations can work with the national and the regional research institutions to generate the information to document the consequences of the disruptions caused by unilateral decisions not conforming with what has been agreed. The product could be a good input to the work of the special rapporteur in the efforts to address this level of denial of the right to health. The manifesto put by the MMS, Medics Mundi Switzerland, is timely and mostly welcome, and I'm sure it will be the spark for similar action by other organizations. The Agenda 2030 is a framework for developing, guiding all of us with the quest of leaving no one behind, what entails the responsibility of ensuring that everyone has good living conditions and in good health. This spirit is well captured by the question put forward for the discussion in this gathering. Is health for all on the right track or on the verge of failing? Let's put health for all on the right track by using the human rights approach in monitoring our actions at all levels. It is doable and will be a key ingredient nurturing our drive to reach the SDGs. We should leave this place on a high note, determined to refuse assembling again in 10 years' time to lament on the failures, but on the contrary, celebrate success. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was very thought-provoking. Are there any questions arising? Yes, Nick.
Thank you. My name is Nick Lorenz, former president of Medicus Mundi Switzerland and Medicus Mundi International. A few years ago, I suffered a stroke in Maputo, actually in Mozambique. My life was saved in a private hospital there. I'm not talking about the funding issue, which you rightly addressed. The $12,000 were covered by my insurance company. But $12,000 are certainly out of the reach of most of the Mozambique people today, even today. My question is, as we see here in Switzerland, our South African healthcare providers invading Switzerland because it's an interesting, financially profit-making health sector. Do you see a role for the private sector in countries like Mozambique or elsewhere?
Okay, thank you. Yes, I think there is a role for the private sector. What we need is to ensure that the regulatory responsibility of the Ministry of Health it's on a good track. The problem is not being for or against the private healthcare providers. It's what they do and to what extent they don't alienate many people for the high prices they charge. And that is the role of the state through the Ministry of Health to regulate how they work. And at the same time, while we allow them to practice, and they're solving many problems, that your example is quite illustrative, but we need not to stay behind and rest. We need to strengthen the public sector. What is the backbone for everyone? That episode that you just recounted is in Maputo, where most of the resources are. If it had happened in a district, could have been a completely different story. And you see, the private sector didn't save your life. So they have expertise, they have the means. But how that expertise and their means could be complementary to what the public sector cannot offer. That's where we have to articulate. Again, I can go back to Maputo, if I digress a bit, but I think it's a good illustration. There is the Heart Institute created in Maputo with collaboration from partners from Switzerland, from UK, and France. And they do heart surgery. And the objective of creating that institution was to take care of the many children with birth defects who would die or died, or they could not have the resources to go to Portugal or to South Africa to be operated. And today the Heart Institute has gone beyond the attention to children to be a real a life-saving platform for many of the people who suffer heart problems in Maputo. So is what the public sector cannot do, those private institutions do. The problem we need to address is that people see it, particularly the owners and those who practice there sometimes, as a mine to get money. That's the problem. This is the problem. And then we cannot fight that just with the regulatory measures. We need to make sure that other incentives are put in place. Better pay, better working conditions for those who work into the public sector, a compensation for the work when they deal with education and running the normal programs that the private sector does not do. So it is a balance, but my main response is strengthen your public sector, reach the unreached, and regulate the way the private sector will complement what you cannot offer.
Thank you so much, Francisco. Thank you.